Hello everyone, hope you're doing well and staying safe out there. And in today's video, I'm going to be giving you my recap and thoughts on episode 8 of It's Okay to Not Be Okay, currently up on Netflix. The title given to this episode is Beauty and the Beast, and this overall was a very sweet and heartwarming episode with a new added twist that is definitely causing me to have some new theories in regards to Moon-Young's mother, since for the past few episodes I've really been thinking she's dead. But after this episode and the teaser for the next one, I'm not so sure anymore. And we also see Kang Tae start to really let go, and I think his safety pin is starting to come loose. Now, is this a good thing? I'm not 100% sure. I mean, he does seem to be a good influence on Moon-Young, but that doesn't necessarily mean that she's a good influence on him, and we can all agree that she's the reason he's changing. So with that, let's get into what actually happens in this episode and my thoughts at the end. The episode starts a little before where we left off in the last episode, with Kang Tae giving Moon-Young the haircut, and we sort of see more interactions during the actual haircut scene. You know, we see more of Kang Tae cutting Moon-Young's hair into that cute, sleek look, and we see Moon-Young freaking out a little bit when she discovers that he actually has been the one cutting Kang Tae's hair all this time. And when she asks, well, who picked that style out for him, Kang Tae says it was him, and then she gets a little worried that he's going to end up giving her a bowl cut as well, since that's not going to be the best look for her. But he settles her down, and after trimming it all up, she looks gorgeous and beautiful. And again, when she asks him what he thinks, he says that she looks very pretty. This is also when she tells Kang Tae that she's now free of her mother, since apparently the whole reason she kept her hair long was because she felt like her mother was controlling her and keeping her from cutting it. And now she's free of her mother, and so she's in the right step to recovering, I'll say that for sure. So Kang Tae obviously likes the new haircut, but the next morning when Song Tae sees it, he's not so happy about it, since apparently Song Tae's favorite thing about Moon-Young was her very long hair. So he tells Moon-Young what he's feeling, which is that he doesn't like this new haircut. And later in the episode, when they're working together in the library, and after Moon-Young has been reading comments about herself online, she gets upset and decides to ask her #1 fan, who's sitting across from her, what he likes most about her fairy tales. And he then tells her it's because Moon-Young writes them. So she's like, oh, so you're a fan of mine. What's your favorite thing about me? And that's when he tells her again, your long hair, which you don't have anymore. So he's just not giving her the answers that she wants. We see throughout the episode that Kang Tae is starting to fall for Moon-Young, and he's having trouble fighting his attraction for her. Like when he's leaving for work after this breakfast scene, he ends up just staring at her as she's looking off into the distance, and he's smiling a lot more around her, and he really does think that she's pretty with her new short hair. So he's having trouble fighting his feelings for her, and I think he's starting to just no longer deny them. Meanwhile, Song-in and Sung-jae are eating, and he's having Sung-jae tell him what she found out about Ju-ri. And later in the episode, we see him and Sung-jae end up moving into Ju-ri's place, where Song-in becomes Jae-soo's roommate, and after a very strange incident involving some gum, ends up getting his facial hair shaved off in the middle of the night. So there was definitely a lot of hair transformations in this episode for sure. Ju-ri's mother has changed her tune about Ju-ri chasing after Kang Tae, since he's not reciprocating her feelings for him, and it looks like she's moved her affection to Song-in, which Ju-ri doesn't like. And when Song-in talks with her at the hospital, she tells him she's not interested, and he just says he knows, since she told him everything when she was drunk. And he tells her he doesn't want her to become a bitch like she says she's going to try and become, and obviously he just likes her how she is. While Kang Tae is at work, we also find out what happened to Moon-Young's father the evening before, and he was apparently having a seizure. And as the director reviews the CCTV footage from that night, he sees that as Moon-Young's father is in the hallway clutching his head, another patient is in the hallway as well. And as he's watching, he notices that she seems to be singing the song her father had mentioned his wife used to sing to their daughter. When he asks Kang Tae to bring in the patient to ask her about it, since he recognizes her in the CCTV footage, she admits to going to the bathroom around that time, but she wasn't the one singing, since that's apparently the ghost, and she's not a ghost. Now, just a reminder, this ghost that she's talking about, both the patients and staff believe that there's a ghost roaming the halls, and that's the person or entity that's been singing. I think it's also important to note that the person in the footage is wearing a black robe with their hair down, but in every other scene we see this patient is wearing a floral robe and her hair is up. So even though the director is really sure it's her, and through reading her lips on the CCTV footage, he's figured out that she was singing My Darling Clementine, she's denying it for some reason. And when Kang Tae is walking her back, she stops in the hallway and laughs a little, since apparently she's been there a while and she's now surprised that anyone has taken notice of her now. Which to me kind of sounded like a confession that it was her singing in the hallways at night this whole time, and she's shocked that they're now figuring it out. And when Kang Tae is helping Moon Young's father change, he mumbles to Kang Tae about his wife again and is saying how she's dead, but it seems like he's not sure she actually is and is overall confused. And after the director talks with the patient, he meets with Kang Tae on the roof and tells him for now not to mention what he'd heard with him and the patient. And when Kang Tae doesn't immediately say, of course, the director knows that Kang Tae wants something for his silence, which is to have Moon Young's class reinstated. When Kang Tae tells Moon Young that her class is back on, he says it's because the patients wanted her back. But when she meets with the director later in the episode, he tells her that it was really because Kang Tae asked him to do it. So of course, Moon Young is very happy to hear this, but also why wouldn't Kang Tae tell her the truth, I wonder? Maybe because he doesn't really want her to know his true feelings for her. Maybe he's scared, we don't know. But either way, the director spills the beans and tells her why her class got reinstated. This is also when the director asks Moon Young if she knows the patient that they were speaking to earlier, and she says of course she knows her because this woman attends her fairy tale class. After the director and Kang Tae meet on the roof, we are taken back to Moon Young's home, where she is seeing Song Tae getting ready to leave and finds out that he's going to meet with Kang Tae at the Jungpang restaurant, and after that go to work. So she pretty much invites herself. And while there, we see how Kang Tae is emotionally affected by being there. He's both happy and sad. We see he's trying to hide how he's feeling as he's eating the noodles, like he's near tears. And we also notice that Song Tae is paying very close attention to Moon Young holding on to Kang Tae as Song Tae is leaving on the bus to the pizza restaurant to go to work there. So we see a lot of jealousy from Song Tae towards Moon Young because he sees that Moon Young is sort of trying to get in the middle of him and his brother. We also see some jealousy on Kang Tae's side when they end up at the coffee shop and he notices that Moon Young is eyeing this guy in the cafe across from her, and he kind of sees her, you know, doing the little hand motion saying I want it, and this guy actually ends up getting up, recognizing her and telling her that he's a fan of hers. He hands her his card and tells her that he had been involved in an event she had done last year, and he ends up kind of asking for her number. She gives it to him, writing it down on this very nice pen, which, newsflash everybody, she's not saying I want the guy, she's saying I want the pen. But Kang Tae doesn't know this and just kind of sees her letting this guy hit on her, and when he asks for a photo, she lets him put his hand on her waist, and Kang Tae just gets super jealous. She also ends up giving this guy her number and leaving a very flirtatious note along with it. And now we as viewers know what she really wants, and that's his really nice pen. And getting it was her ulterior motive for the whole thing. And she also tells him that Song-in told her that every time she smiles at a fan, she sells a book. And he's just overall very upset by the whole encounter. Like, obviously he's jealous that this guy was hitting on her and she was in his mind, showing him affection. And he ends up actually taking it out on Song-in later when he sees him at the hospital, you know, kind of giving him the third degree for apparently telling Moon-young that she had to act this way towards fans, and that, you know, she shouldn't have to smile at her fans. They should appreciate her work. She doesn't have to live as a celebrity. He's just fuming.
대표님의 그 저급한 영업 방식 때문에 그 여자가 아무한테나 멋있네 어쩌네 그딴 소리나 하고 하트나 남발하고 남의 허리에 막 손도 함부로 두르고 초면인 남자랑 밥까지 먹으러 다니고 얼마나 억지로 웃게 만들었으면 입꼬리만 가식적으로 올라가는 게 꼭 조커 같다고요, 조커. 아, 지금 무슨 소리 하는 거예요? 안판을 똑바로 하시라.
So, like I sort of mentioned earlier, we do see a lot of rivalry for Kangtae's affection between Moon-young and Song-tae through the episode. And it eventually ends up with a pretty big fight between them over Mongtae, the nightmare-catching doll, since they end up fighting over who it belongs to and wind up pulling it apart. And Song-tae obviously gets very upset and goes to beat up Moon-young, but we know Moon-young's tough and doesn't take that lying down. So Kangtae comes home to them fighting in Kangtae and Song-tae's room. Kangtae goes to apologize to Song-tae for not asking for his permission before giving the doll to Moon-young, and reminds Song-tae that the nightmare doll doesn't make the butterflies go away, and he didn't think that Song-tae would mind, and tells him that Moon-young really needs it. So Song-tae ends up telling Kangtae that Moon-young can have the doll, but she can't have Kangtae. So obviously Song-tae is noticing that Moon-young is trying to get between them, like I mentioned earlier, and is not liking it. And Kangtae in this moment promises Song-tae that Moon-young won't get in between them. As Kangtae is sewing the doll back together, Moon-young appears and ends up falling asleep in his lap. But before she does, he asks her again not to fight with his brother, and she asks how to do that exactly. How does she keep everything inside like he does? He tells her that if he just keeps everything he's feeling inside, nothing will happen. And if he didn't keep his feelings in check, his relationship with his brother would be totally different right now. And that he keeps it all inside to protect Song-tae. Moon-young thinks this is why they're meant to be together, since she has the exact opposite problem. He keeps everything inside and she just can't. This is also when she brings up the guy from the cafe, and she explains to him what exactly she was calling handsome, which was the pen, and shows him that, and assures him that he's way prettier than that guy. After this is when Moon-young falls asleep on his lap, and he eventually gets up after the doll is repaired and gives it to Moon-young, who's asleep, and tucks her in. And Kangtae just sort of sits there and watches her sleep for a little bit, and we see her hold her hand while she's sleeping. And speaking of showing affection, we see that officially those two patients that we keep seeing locked at the hip are indeed in love and trying to hide it and meet secretly. So they try to meet in the linen closet, but they're caught by Kangtae. And as they plead for him not to report them, he says that they should actually just focus on healing while in here, since, you know, patients aren't meant to date while at the hospital, and if they want to be together, they should get better first here, and then they can be released and be with each other in the real world. He ends up not reporting them and says he still hasn't decided on what to do, but before he can decide, we see the female patient's ex-husband show up to visit her. And just a reminder, this is the patient who we found out in an earlier episode had been letting her husband pretty much beat her to death for years before she finally left him and was admitted to the hospital for her own mental illnesses. Now, why the doctors thought this visit was going to be a good idea, we don't know, but she ends up running out of the room they were talking in, and the other male staff member who was supposed to be watching and making sure that nothing happens gets caught on something and isn't able to chase after them, since when she leaves, the ex-husband goes after her. This is when they end up outside where Moon-young is having a smoke break, and as she's telling her ex-husband that she's met someone else and won't be taking him back, he starts to get violent, and this is when Moon-young intervenes, and she ends up throwing an empty can at his head. which I thought was kind of interesting. As the patient hides behind Moon-young, the ex-husband ends up punching Moon-young in the face, and this causes Kang-tae, who's also outside, to snap, and he jumps the visitor, punching him and wrestling him to the ground, and it doesn't seem like he was going to stop there. But as people go to surround him, he finally gets a hold of himself and gets back under control and ends up getting suspended. Even though the director sort of thinks that it was self-defense, the head nurse pushes that Kang-tae needs to be reprimanded for what he did, you know, attacking a visitor. And the director does agree with that and decides on suspending him without pay. I also found something else in this scene very interesting, since it looks to me like Moon-young let the guy punch her so that she could grab something from the ground or maybe have an excuse for her next action that she planned to take, since it looks like if Kang-tae hadn't intervened, she was going to hit this guy over the head with a rock. This is brought to light when Kang-tae goes to check on Moon-young, and as he holds her cheek where the guy had hit her after she says it hurts, we see her drop this huge rock she'd been hiding behind her back. The scene of Kang-tae getting suspended after this was also kind of sweet, since Song-tae is attending the meeting, and Song-tae tells the director that since Kang-tae is his younger brother, he'll give his little brother a good talking to, and scolds Kang-tae for not tolerating what happened and asks why he did that and why couldn't he have just counted to 3 before taking any action, pretty much repeating all the things that Kang-tae is always telling Song-tae to do. So it was a real role reversal here. As Kang-tae is packing his stuff, since he's now suspended, he first looks upset. But as he's leaving the hospital, a patient mentions to the others that it looked like Kang-tae was smiling as he was leaving. And as he's walking out the building, we see he is smiling. And when he sees Moon-young sitting on a bench outside, his smile gets bigger and he ends up running towards her. When he gets there, he's smiling even bigger and laughing, telling Moon-young that he's been suspended without pay, and reminds her about what she said a few episodes ago, that she would drop everything if he wanted to go and do something. And he brings that up, mentions that I want to go somewhere and I want to go do it now. So that's how they end the episode. It's interesting, you know, since we saw some really good change in Moon-young last episode and this one, of course, we're going to see Kang-tae's behavior be affected by Moon-young as well. And I gotta say, jealous Kang-tae was very funny, since he doesn't seem to even know why he was mad or wasn't able to admit to it, which just shows that he is not as in tune with his emotions as he thinks he is, and that bottling everything up is maybe not a good thing. And we're definitely seeing that, since his control seems to be slipping, and I'm a little scared because it seems to be slipping and causing more violent tendencies. So yes, he seems to be a really good influence on Moon-young, but Moon-young I don't think is the best influence for him. We have seen Moon-young help other patients through their issues, whether she meant to or not, but I don't think that that necessarily means that she's good for Kang-tae's mental health. I mean, she could be, she's definitely helping him let loose, but I'm kind of afraid that it's going to take a darker turn before he gets better, if that makes sense. There's also obviously going to be a rift between the brothers. I can see that coming a mile away, and I'm worried for it, but I'm also excited. I'm also now very curious about the other patient who seems to have been the one singing in the hallways at night and perhaps trying to purposefully trigger Moon-young's father. Someone in the comments on my last video said they thought maybe she was Moon-young's mother, and I kind of at first was like, that can't be possible since Moon-young has her in her class and hasn't recognized her. However, because she has a lot of memories of her mother, we don't actually see her face, so it could be that even though Moon-young does remember her mother, she was traumatized by her, and it's been a long time since she's seen her mother, so she maybe doesn't remember her face. And so maybe it could be her. Or, this is another theory, which, you know, this isn't really a normal situation in Korean dramas, but this one is a little different. So it could be that she is a huge fan of Moon-young's mother. And because she was a huge fan, maybe a stalker fan, she just seems to know all this stuff and maybe even broke into the director's office and read Moonyoung's father's file, and so she knows about the song and how it affects him mentally. That's a possibility. That'd be a very different twist that I feel like we haven't seen. So could be, or she could be Moonyoung's mom. I mean, that seems the simplest answer, but they make it so obvious that it makes me want to not believe that that's the case. I don't think that we're gonna find out more about her mother in the next episode, since I'm guessing the next one's going to be the typical going to the sea, romantic overnight trip that usually happens in these kind of dramas, which I'm excited to see, because even though that's a typical storyline, I feel like since Moonyoung is involved, it's not gonna be very typical. I also can't wait for more comic relief with everyone living in Juri's house, and I honestly think that Juri and the CEO would make a very cute couple. I think he would be very supportive of her, but he does look very strange without that facial hair, I gotta say. With that, I'm going to end this video. After what we saw involving the patient with the floral robe, do you think that she's Moonyoung's mother, or is there something else going on there? I feel like the director may suspect that she's related to them somehow, but let me know what you think in the comments below. If you like this video, please make sure to subscribe and ring the bell. And until next time, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye.